this is the section of the spinal cord which you see in the histology, and you have been doing it in the first year. And you all know that there is a gray matter and there is a white matter, right? The Can you hear me clearly? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Right. This is the white matter here, and this is the central gray matter. And the gray matter in the spinal cord is in continuity, which breaks up as it ascends in the brain stem, and the nuclei, they get scattered all out. Now, the gray matter is actually made up of what? You're going to tell me. Yes, Irtaza, can you tell me what is the gray matter? I'll ask few questions and just move on because we have done this. Yes, Irtaza, Saad, Umar, what is a gray matter? It is made up of what? ये शुएब, ये सारे उमर और हुसैन सब सो रहे हैं?
Ma'am, collection of cell bodies. No,
Yes.
ma'am, I'm here.
Good. That's it. All right. So it's the collection of the cell body. This is the neuron, which is actually forming the whole of your central nervous system. It has a body, right? This is the cell body. The collection of cell bodies is in the gray matter. And these are smaller processes, the dendrites, and this is the long axon. And these axons are forming the nerve fibers, and these processes, they are in the white matter, right? So यही जो neuron है, that is collected here in the gray matter. And the main type of neuron in the gray matter in the spinal cord, they're all multipolar neurons. There are neurons in the posterior gray horn. This is the posterior gray horn. This is the anterior gray horn. And this is the lateral horn, which is in the thoracolumbar region, where there is the autonomic outflow. The rest of the parts of the spinal cord, they're just the anterior and the posterior gray horn. This is the sensory horn, posterior horn, and this is the motor horn, which is the anterior horn. The sensory information comes here. The sensory nerve fibers enter here into the posterior horn and gives it through the internential neurons information to the motor neurons in the anterior horn, and then they pass out from here the motor nerve. And they both, the sensory and the motor nerve, they're forming the a spinal nerve, and they are just moving, and the motor fibers are leaving and the sensory fibers are entering into it. And this is the thoracolumbar outflow, which is only supplying the autonomic nerve fiber. All contains the multipolar neurons. And this is what the lateral white column, the posterior white column, and the anterior white column. And the connecting zones are the anterior commissures, right? The connecting zones, the anterior commissure and the posterior commissure, right? These fissures are in posterior median fissure, this is the anterior median fissure. The pia mater is the membrane which is immediately surrounding it. Then there is the arachnoid matter, and then there is the dura mater. The neurons which are present in the posterior horn, all are sensory neurons, and different types of sensations, they are carried by these neurons. You have done this. I'll just name and list, and we will discuss these with the different types of the tracts. Now, the neurons, the first which are present at the apex of the posterior horn here, which we have drawn in the spinal cord also here, is the substantia gelatinosa, right? And it is present throughout the length of the spinal cord, mainly carries the pain and temperature sensation. Now, I will be asking you which type of neurons will be stimulated when the pain and temperature is being carried out. When the touch or 2-point discrimination is been carried out, then what is the type of the neuron which is receiving this information, right? So pain and temperature and touch by substantia gelatinosa. The nucleus proprius is also present through the spinal cord. It is taking 2-point discrimination, proprioception, and vibration sense, right? And the nucleus dorsalis or Clark's neurons, this is the two names. The thoracic, they are present in the thoracic and lumbar region, carry the proprioceptive impulses from the muscle spin, right? the neuromuscular and the tendon spindles which are present in the muscles, and visceral afferent nucleus is also present in thoracic and lumbar regions of the spinal cord. All right. Now, the tracks which are present in the white column, they are either ascending or they are descending, right? The ascending tracks, they start from the spinal cord and they reach the central nervous system. They will pass through the spinal cord, they ascend through the brainstem and reach the cerebral cortex. And the descending fibers, they start from the cerebral cortex and they descend through the brainstem and reach the spinal cord. All right. So this is the basic concept of ascending, and all ascending tracks are the sensory tracks, and all descending tracks are motor tracks. ठीक है, इतना concept ठीक है. So I have now told you that there are different columns in the white matter: anterior column, posterior column, lateral column, and you are generally asked, write the tracks which are present in the anterior column, write the tracks which are present in the posterior column, like this. And the white matter mainly consists of their nerve fibers, as you know, and in addition to this, there are neuroglial cells, which are the sporting cells, right? And of course, there are blood vessels present in between. Now, this is the section of the spinal cord, which I hope you have memorized by this time. Now, the ascending tracts have been labeled on one side, and the descending tracts on the other side, although they are present on the both sides. But the section they draw generally like this, so that they are not mixed, and it's easy to memorize the things. Right? This is the posterior white column. This is the lateral white column. This is the point where the motor nerve root is leaving, and this is where the sensory nerve root is entering. So between the sensory and motor nerve roots, this is the lateral white column, and this is the anterior white column, right? So the first you should know the boundaries of this part is the posterior part, right? The posterior to the posterolateral, the posterior where the posterior roots are entering, and here the motor roots are leaving. The lateral white column, the anterior white column, and posterior white column. The posterior white column contains fasciculus gracilis and cuneatus. Gracilis on the medial side and the cuneatus on the lateral side. And then in the lateral white column, there is anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tracts, and there is a lateral spinothalamic tract. And this is spino-olivary here, and spinotectal, the small ascending tracts. And in the anterior part is only the anterior spinothalamic tract. I will not enlisting the descending tracts yet. We'll discuss this in our next class. Today, our main focus is on all these ascending tracts. So this is the general pattern, how the sensation is carried. This is a spinal nerve. This you have already done. I'm just quickly reviewing this thing. And the information passes through the sensory fibers in the spinal nerve. This blue is sensory fiber, which pass through this dilated zone, which is known as the dorsal root ganglia, or the spinal ganglia. Every spinal nerve has a spinal ganglia, right? So this is the dorsal root ganglia. So the sensations pass through the spinal nerve and they reach here. First relay station is the dorsal root ganglia, which is on the posterior side. Then they pass through the sensory root, which is the posterior horn. And this is the anterior horn. This is the lateral horn. The anterior horn, the motor fibers are in the red, and they are passing, these are motor fibers, into the spinal nerve. But this is important to now understand, because I will be speaking out this, the dorsal root ganglia or the spinal root ganglia, which is forming the first relay station. Any impulse or any sensation, the pathways which they travel, they have to relay, right? And in the ascending tracts, There are three relay stations. ये वही है जैसे any relay game you play, और relay game में क्या होता है, you are holding any stick, and one person runs and give that stick to the next person, and then that person stops and the next one runs off, and like this. So there are three relay stations in the pathway of any sensations which are carried from the spinal cord to the cerebral cortex.